the Jewish babies were forced into the pyramid and the slaying of children and this ruthlessness. And I thought, why is, of my favorite biblical story, the second one being Kings, I really like the David and Bathsheba story. I like that one. But the other one I like, the Pharaoh story, is wonderful. And I said, well, if he was purely evil, it would be of no interest. You wouldn't need 10 plagues, you'd need one plague. If there's a pure evil, stick a knife in his eye and it's done.
He had paused to drink in the thick fog before taking the circuitous route back to Toynbee Hall. That had been a few minutes before. And suddenly, he was in another place, and it was no longer 6:15 of a chill November morning in 1888. He had looked up as light flooded him in that other place. It had been soot-silent in Spitalfields, but suddenly, without any sense of having moved or having been moved, he was flooded with light. And when he looked up, he was in that other place. Paused now, only a few minutes after the transfer, he leaned against the bright wall of the city and recalled the light from 1,000 mirrors, in the walls, in the ceiling. A bedroom with a girl in it. A lovely girl, not like Black Mary Kelly or Dark Annie Chapman or Kate Eddowes or any of the other pathetic scum he had been forced to attend. A lovely girl, blonde, wholesome, until she had opened her robe and turned into the same sort of slut he had been compelled to use in his work in Whitechapel. A sybarite, a creature of pleasures, a Juliet, she had said, before he used the big-bladed knife on her. He had found the knife under the pillow in the bed to which she had led him. How shameful. Unresisting had he been, all confused, clutching his black bag with all the tremors of a child. He who had moved through the London night like oil, moved where he wished, accomplished his ends unchecked 8 times, now led towards sin by another, merely another of the tarts taking advantage of him while he tried to distinguish what had happened to him and where he was. How shameful. And he had used it on her. And that had only been minutes before, though he had worked very efficiently on her. The knife had been rather unusual. The blade had seemed to be 2 wafer-thin sheets of metal with a pulsing, glowing something between, a kind of sparking, such as might be produced by a Van de Graaff generator. But that was patently ridiculous. It had no wires attached to it, no bus bars, nothing to produce even the crudest electrical discharge. He had thrust the knife into the Gladstone bag, where now it lay beside the scalpels and the spool of catgut and the racked vials in their leather cases and the fetus in its bottle. Mary Jane Kelly's fetus. He had worked efficiently, but swiftly, and had laid her out almost exactly in the same fashion as Kate Eddowes, the throat slashed completely through from ear to ear, the torso laid open down between the breasts to the vagina, the intestines pulled out and draped over the right shoulder, a piece of the intestines being detached and placed between the left arm and the body. The liver had been punctured with the point of the knife, with a vertical cut slitting the left lobe of the liver. He had been surprised to find the liver showed none of the signs of cirrhosis so prevalent in these Spitalfields tarts, who drank incessantly to rid themselves of the burden of living the dreary lives they moved through grotesquely. In fact, this one seemed totally unlike the others, even if she had been more brazen in her sexual overtures. And the knife, that knife under the bed pillow. He had severed the vena cava leading to the heart, and then he had gone to work on the face. He had thought of removing the left kidney again, as he had Kate Eddowes. And he smiled to himself as he conjured up the expression that must have been on the face of Mr. George Lusk, chairman of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, when he received the cardboard box in the mail. The box containing Miss Eddowes' kidney, and the letter, impiously misspelled. "From hell, Mr. Lusk, sir. I send you half the kidney I took from one woman. Preserved it for you. T'other piece I fried and ate it. Was very nice. I may send you the bloody niff that took it out if you only wait while longer. Catch me when you can, Mr. Lusk." He had wanted to sign that one, "Yours truly, Jack the Ripper," or even Red Jack, or maybe Leather Apron, whichever had tickled his fancy. But a sense of style had stopped him. To go too far was to defeat his own purposes. It may even have been too much to suggest to Mr. Lusk that he had eaten the kidney. How hideous. True, he had smelled it. This blonde girl, this Juliet with the knife under her pillow, she was the 9th. He leaned against the smooth steel wall without break or seam, and he rubbed his eyes. When would he be able to stop? When would they realize? When would they get his message, a message so clear, written in blood, that only the blindness of their own cupidity forced them to misunderstand? Would he be compelled to decimate the endless regiments of Spitalfield sluts to make them understand? Would he be forced to run the cobbles ankle deep in black blood before they sensed what he was saying and were impelled to make reforms? But as he took his blood-soaked hands from his eyes, he realized what he must have sensed all along. He was no longer in Whitechapel. This was not Miller's Court, nor anywhere in Spitalfields. It might not even be London. But how could that be? Had God taken him? Had he died in a senseless instant between the anatomy lesson of Mary Jane Kelly, that filth she had actually kissed him, and the bedroom disembowelment of this Juliet? Had heaven finally called him to his reward for the work he'd done? The Reverend Mr. Barnett would love to know about this. But then, he'd have loved to know about it all. But Red Jack wasn't about to tell. Let the reforms come as the Reverend and his wife wished for them, and let them think their pamphleteering had done it, instead of the scalpels of Jack. If he was dead, would his work be finished? He smiled to himself. If heaven had taken him, then it must be that the work was finished. Successfully. But if that was so, then who was this Juliet who now lay spread out moist and cooling in the bedroom of 1,000 mirrors? And in that instant he felt fear. What if even God misinterpreted what he had done? As the good folk of Queen Victoria's London had misinterpreted, as Sir Charles Warren had misinterpreted. What if God believed the superficial and ignored the real reason? But no, that was ludicrous. If anyone would understand, it was the good God who had sent him the message that told him to set things aright. God loved him, as he loved God, and God would know. But he felt fear in that moment. Because who was the girl he had just carved? "She was my granddaughter, Juliet," said a voice immediately beside him. His head refused to move, to turn that few inches to see who had spoken. The Gladstone was beside him, resting on the smooth and reflective surface of the street. He could not get to a knife before he was taken. At last they had caught up with Jack. He began to shiver uncontrollably. "No need to be afraid," the voice said. It was a warm and succoring voice, an older man, but he shook as with an ague, and he turned to look. It was a kindly old man with a gentle smile, who spoke again without moving his lips. "No one can hurt you. How do you do?" The man from 1888 sank slowly to his knees. "Forgive me, dear God, I did not know." The old man's laughter rose inside the head of the man on his knees. It rose like a beam of sunlight moving across a Whitechapel alleyway from noon to 1 o'clock, rising and illuminating the gray bricks of soot-coated walls. It rose and illuminated his mind. "I'm not God. Oh, marvelous idea, but no, I'm not God. Would you like to meet God?"
The child's brain will automatically believe what it's told, even if what it's told is nonsense.
It's justified. And then and then I remembered these are one of the lines that stuck there, but Vani Akshay et lev paro, like I will harden Pharaoh's heart. And there's not much future tense in the Bible. But I thought for us to have, even in the Bible, to have an empathetic character in Pharaoh, this idea we have someone who does evil things, but in the end, it's this very clear line where God says, like, I am going to harden his hearts. I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. And the idea, if he had hardened his own heart, it'd be no story.
brain is the devil.
Then when the child grows up, it will tend to pass on that same nonsense to its children.
Perhaps a devil is nothing but a god that got bad press.
Well, so many people think they got the truth, but they only got deceit.
It has happened.
And the devil's greatest weapon was deception.
The whole Lucifer story is one of an alternate entity that tried to compete for power or an influence and was thrown out of the paradise, out of the heavenly place. Very similar,
And so
actually,
religion
to the
goes on
story of Trotsky.
generation to generation.
Trotsky became vilified as evil incarnate, the devil whose slightest influence was instant death to anyone.
What are you going to be known as when you die? Sinner or winner? Come on, Shiro. To be winners,
Very
not to
similar
be
to the
sinners.
Lucifer story, where he turned against the Supreme Being and was expelled from paradise. It was thus.
For many people, part of growing up is killing off the virus of faith with a good strong dose of rational thinking.
And I thought about that, like, even in this case of an extreme evil, it's God that does art, so we are forced to empathize. And then I thought back to my black and white, and I thought this is, again, evil in the service of religion, of a pure good and evil. But the books aren't that way, the religion itself. Because then I started to think about Jewish tradition and what follows the 10 plagues and the drowning of the Egyptians. It's basically, I guess most of you probably know, that a glass gets broken at a Jewish wedding. And this, one of the things that what it represents is the destruction of Jerusalem. That we never have a pure joy.
But if an individual doesn't succeed in shaking it off, his mind is stuck in a permanent state of infancy.
I'm sure we can find one of the artists who would mold one for you. Is it important? No, I can see it isn't. What a strange mind you
know.
have.
Some religions
You neither
are less
believe
odious
nor
than
doubt.
others.
How can you contain both concepts at once? Would you like me to straighten some of your brain patterns? No, I see you're afraid. Well, let it be for the nonce. We'll do it another time. He grabbed the kneeling man and drew him erect. You're covered with blood! Have to get you cleaned up. Aha, there's an ablute near here. Incidentally, I was very impressed with the way you handled Juliet. You're the first, you know. No, how could you? In any case, you are the first to deal her as good as she gave. You would have been amused at what she did to Caspar Hauser. Squeezed part of his brain and then sent him back. Ha-ha! Let him live out part of his life, and then, like a little twit, she made me bring him back a second time and used a knife on him. The same knife you took, I believe. And then sent him back to his own time. Marvelous mystery. In all the tapes on Unsolved Phenomena, don't you know? But she was much sloppier than you. She had a great verve in her amusements, but very little éclat. Except with Judge Crater. Now, there she was. And he paused and laughed lightly. I'm an old man, and I ramble on like a muskrat. You want to get cleaned up and shown around, I know. And then we can talk. I just wanted you to know I was satisfied with the way you disposed of her. In a way, I'll miss the little twit. She was such a good fuck. The old man picked up the Gladstone bag and, holding the man spattered with blood, he moved off down the clean and shimmering street. You wanted her killed? The man from 1888 asked, unbelieving. The old man nodded, but his lips never moved. Of course. Otherwise, why bring her Jack the Ripper?
Oh, my dear God,
He thought.
I'm in hell, and I'm entered as Jack.
No, my boy, no, you're not in hell at all. You're in the future. For you, the future, for me, the world of now. You came from 1888, and you're now in... He stopped, silently speaking for an instant, as though computing apples in terms of dollars, and then resumed, 3077. 3077. Oh, it's a fine world, filled with happy times, and we're glad to have you with us. Come along now, and you'll wash. In the ablutorium, the late Juliet's grandfather changed his head. "I really despise it," he informed the man from 1888, grabbing fingerfuls of his cheeks and stretching the flabby skin like elastic. But Juliet insisted. I was willing to humor her, if indeed that was what it took to get her to lie down, but what with toys from the past and changing my head every time I wanted her to fuck me, it was trying. Very trying. He stepped into one of the many identically shaped booths set flush into the walls. The tambour door rolled down, and there was a soft chuck sound, almost chitinous. The tambour door rolled up, and the late Juliet's grandfather, now 6 years younger than the man from 1888, stepped out, stark naked and wearing a new head. The body is fine, yes, replaced last year," he said, examining the genitals and a mole on his right shoulder. The man from 1888 looked away. This was hell, and God hated him. "Well, don't just stand there, Jack," Juliet's grandfather smiled. "Hit one of those booths and get your ablutions." "That isn't my name," said the man from 1888, very softly, as though he had been whipped. "Oh, it'll do. Now go get washed." Jack approached one of the booths. It was a light green in color, but changed to mauve as he stepped in front of it. It will only clean you. What are you afraid of?" "I don't want to be changed." Juliet's grandfather did not laugh. "That's a mistake," he said cryptically. He made a peremptory motion with his hand, and the man from 1888 entered the booth, which promptly revolved in its niche, sank into the floor, and made a hearty zzz sound, and when it rose and revolved and opened, Jack stumbled out, looking terribly confused. His long sideburns had been neatly trimmed, his beard stubble had been removed, his hair was 3 shades lighter and was now parted on the left side rather than in the middle. He still wore the same long, dark coat trimmed with astrakhan, dark suit with white collar and black necktie. But now the garments seemed new, unsoiled, of course, possibly synthetics built to look like his former garments. "Now," Juliet's grandfather said, "isn't that much better? A good cleansing always sets one's mind to rights." And he stepped into another booth from which he issued in a moment, wearing a soft paper jumper that fitted from neck to feet without a break. He moved toward the door. "Where are we going?" the man from 1888 asked the younger grandfather beside him. "I want you to meet someone," said Juliet's grandfather, and Jack realized that he was moving his lips now. He decided not to comment on it. There had to be a reason. "I'll walk you there, if you promise not to make gurgling sounds at the city. It's a nice city, but I live here, and frankly, tourism is boring." And Jack did not reply. Grandfather took it for acceptance of the terms. And they walked. Jack became overpowered by the sheer weight of the city. It was obviously extensive, massive, and terribly clean. It was his dream for Whitechapel come true. He asked about slums, about doss houses, and the grandfather shook his head. "Oh, long gone." So it had come to pass. The reforms for which he had pledged his immortal soul, they had come to pass. He swung the Gladstone and walked jauntily, but after a few minutes his pace sagged once more. There was no one to be seen in the streets. Just shining, clean buildings and streets that ran off in aimless directions and came to unexpected stops.
And there is a real danger that he will infect the next generation.
Worry is a false virtue.
We always have to remember the destruction of Jerusalem. Something gets broken, even under the chuppah, under the wedding canopy. And then in this same case, actually, which I thought, because I see the Bible as literature now, which is always a hard class to teach at college, because there's always the religious kids fighting when you take Bible as literature, and all the major religions represented and screaming out from the back, say, I know, we have to go on. Anyway, but nonetheless, I see it as literature, but it's, to religious Jews, it is but the Word of God. And so how does that story continue on in tradition? And I thought about it. On Passover, we say the Hallel prayer, which is a prayer of joy. And I thought this was really nice, now as we try to have a war and drop bombs and food at the same time. But we say a half Hallel. You say half, the prayer is cut in half on Passover, because we're after just running from the Egyptians, but because of so many Egyptians died in the destruction of Egypt, you only say half the prayer because we must empathize. We can't be truly joyous if people have died. Anyway.
Your brain is the devil.
I'm going to meet someone who has experienced religion as child abuse firsthand.
Ladies and gentlemen, your attention please. This is a public service announcement from Over the Edge. Warning, Over the Edge may cause some people to forget things they want to remember. And it may cause some people to remember things they want to forget. Be forewarned. For over 30 years, this is the Over the Edge show with your host, Izzy Isn't, the only man qualified to operate the Amnesia and Total Recall memory machine. And now here he is to tell you the who, what, where, when, and why.
Jill Mitten.
Oh, hello.
I'm Richard Dawkins.
Hello, Richard.
How do you do? Jill Mitten was brought up in a strict Christian sect. Today, she's a psychologist who rehabilitates young adults similarly scarred by their narrow religious upbringing.
Your brain is the devil.
They need to be allowed to hear different perspectives on things. They need to be allowed to investigate. They need to be allowed to develop their critical faculties so
I thought,
that they can take a number of different viewpoints and weigh them up and decide which one is for them.
there's some thoughts on evil. I'm going to read my short piece. Sip. It's called Clearing God's Name. God planted a garden in Eden to the east and placed there the man whom he had formed. Genesis 2:8. There was a common misconception about the order of things. When the earth was tohu bohu, and up did not have the slightest inclination to separate from down, and wet did not intend to give way to dry, God looked earthward with Adam at his side. I will send you to that place, said God. I don't want to go, Adam told him. God began to lift the sky from under the sea. The roiling mass tried to hold its formlessness. Earth clinging to the hand of God, trailing up toward the sky until it could go no further. The mountains born from failure. I will not go, insisted Adam. God laughed. It was only the start, a jesseling of the canvas. With a giant spoon of stone, God scooped out the oceans, scraped out the lakes, and, as if considering a half-eaten slice of custard pie, turned the spoon over and scratched out all the rivers of the world. Adam was not impressed. For Adam, he added color to the fish in the sea, placed billy goats on rocky ledges, and added to the ibex a second horn. Still, Adam refused to descend. Eternity piled onto itself as the discussion continued. For Adam, he added color to the fish in the sea, placed billy goats on rocky ledges, and added to the ibex a second horn. Still, Adam refused to descend. Eternity piled onto itself as the discussion continued.
brain is the devil.
Thursday. Today in a wood we heard a voice. We hunted for it but could not find it.
Email one they find out that is significantly shared in the context. How many people
Adam said he had heard it before, but had never seen it, though he had been quite close to it, so he was sure it was like the air and could not be seen. I asked him to tell me all he knew about the voice, but he knew very little. It was Lord of the Garden, he said, and had told him to dress the garden and keep it. And it had said that we must not eat of the fruit of a certain tree, and that if we ate of it, we should surely die. Our death would be certain. That was all he knew. I wanted to see the tree, so we had a pleasant long walk to where it stood alone in a secluded and lovely spot, and there we sat down and looked long at it with interest, and talked. Adam said it was the
tree of knowledge, of good and evil.
Good and evil?
Yes.
What is that?
What is what?
Why, those things. What is good?
I don't know. How should I know?
Well then, what is evil?
I suppose it is the name of something. But I do not know what.
But Adam, you must have some idea of what it is.
Why should I have some idea? I have never seen the thing. How am I to form any conception of it? What is your own notion of it?
Of course I had none, and it was unreasonable of me to require him to have one. There was no way for either of us to guess what it might be. It was a new word like the other. We had not heard them before, and they meant nothing to us. My mind kept running on the subject, and presently I said, Adam, there are those other words, die and death. What do they mean?
I have no idea.
Well then, what do you think they mean?
My child, cannot you see that it is impossible for me to make even a plausible guess concerning a matter about which I am absolutely ignorant? A person can't think when he has no material to think with. Isn't that true?
Yes, I know it, but how vexatious it is. Just because I can't know, I all the more want to know. We sat silent a while, turning the puzzle over in our minds, and then all at once I saw how to find out and was surprised that we had not thought of it in the beginning. It was so simple. I sprang up and said, how stupid we are. Let us eat of it. We shall die, and then we shall know what it is and not have any more bother about it. Adam saw that it was the right idea, and he rose at once and was reaching for an apple when a most curious creature came floundering by, of a kind which we had never seen before. And of course we dropped a matter that was of no special scientific interest to rush after one that was. Miles and miles over hill and dale we chased that lumbering, scrambling, fluttering goblin, till we were away down the western side of the valley where the pillared great banyan tree is. And there we caught him. What a joy, what a triumph. He's a pterodactyl.
Monday. If there is anything on the planet that she is not interested in, it is not in my list. There are animals that I am indifferent to, but it is not so with her. She has no discrimination. She takes to all of them. She thinks they are all treasures. Every new one is welcome. When the mighty Brontosaurus came striding into camp, she regarded it as an acquisition. I considered it a calamity. That is a good sample of the lack of harmony that prevails in our views of things. She wanted to domesticate it. I wanted to make it a present of the homestead and move out. She believed it could be tamed by kind treatment and would be a good pet. I said a pet 21 feet high and 84 feet long would be no proper thing to have about the place. Because even with the best intentions and without meaning any harm, it could sit down on the house and mash it. For anyone could see by the look of its eye that it was absent-minded. Still, her heart was set upon having that monster, and she couldn't give it up. She thought we could start a dairy with it and wanted me to help her milk it. But I wouldn't. It was too risky. The sex wasn't right, and we hadn't any ladder anyway. Then she wanted to ride it and look at the scenery. 30 or 40 feet of its tail was lying on the ground like a fallen tree, and she thought she could climb it, but she was mistaken. When she got to the steep place, it was too slick, and whoop, down she came. And would have hurt herself, but for me. Was she satisfied now? No. Nothing ever satisfies her but demonstration. Untested theories are not in her line, and she won't have them. She was born scientific. It is the right spirit. I concede it. It attracts me. I feel the influence of it. If I were with her more, I think I should take it up myself. Well, she had one theory remaining about this colossus. She thought that if we could tame him and make him friendly, we could stand him in the river and use him for a bridge. It turned out that he was already plenty tame enough, at least as far as she was concerned. So she tried her theory, but it failed. Every time she got him properly placed in the river and went ashore to cross over on him, he came out and followed her around like a pet mountain, like the other animals. They all do that. Tuesday. She has taken up with a snake now. The other animals are glad, for she was always experimenting with them and bothering them. Nothing comes amiss to her in the animal line. She trusts them all. They all trust her. And because she wouldn't betray them, she thinks they won't betray her. And I'm glad, because the snake talks. And this enables me to get a rest. Friday. She says the snake advises her to try the fruit of that tree, and says the result will be a great and fine and noble education.
Thursday. I tried to get him some of those apples. I failed, but I think the good intention pleased him. They are forbidden, and he says I shall come to harm. But so I come to harm through pleasing him. Why shall I care for that harm?
Tuesday. She has been climbing that tree again.
You're listening to Over the Edge. Your Brain is the Devil, Part 7 tonight. Looking at the origins for a few minutes. This is KPFA, KPFB in Berkeley, KFCF in Fresno, kpfa.org online. Please visit us there. There's much to see, much to know, and much to see about Over the Edge there. However, you should also go to Negativland.com, Negativland.com, no E in the middle, Negativland.com, and where there's a lot more about Over the Edge, and a much larger archive of past shows to listen to. That's Negativland.com.
She said nobody was looking. Seems to consider that a sufficient justification for chancing any dangerous thing. told her that. The word justification moved her admiration. And envy, too, I thought. It is a good word. I advised her to keep away from the tree. She said she wouldn't. I foresee trouble. Will immigrate. Wednesday. Escaped that night and rode a horse as fast as he could go, hoping to get clear out of the garden and hide in some other country before the disaster should fall. But it was not to be. About an hour after sunup, as I was riding through a flowery plain where thousands of animals were grazing, slumbering, or playing with each other according to their wont, all of a sudden they broke into a tempest of frightful noises. And in one moment, the plain was a frantic commotion, and every beast was destroying its neighbor. I knew what it meant. Eve had eaten that fruit, and death was coming to the world. The tigers ate my horse, paying no attention when I ordered them to desist, and they would even have eaten me if I had stayed. Which I didn't. I found this place outside the garden, but she has found me out. In fact, I was not sorry she came, for there are but meager pickings here, and she brought some of those apples. I was obliged to eat them. I was so hungry. It was against my principles, but I find that principles have no real force except when one is well fed. She came curtained in boughs and bunches of leaves, and when I asked her what she meant by such nonsense and snatched them away and threw them down, she tittered and blushed. I had never seen a person titter and blush before, and to me it seemed unbecoming and foolish. She said I would soon know how it was myself. This was correct. Hungry as I was, I laid down the apple half-eaten and arrayed myself in the discarded boughs and branches, and then spoke to her with some severity and ordered her to go and get some more and not make such a spectacle of herself. She did it. And after this, we crept down to where the wild beast battle had been and collected some skins, and I made her patch together a couple of suits proper for public occasions. They are uncomfortable, it is true, but they are in the mode, and that is the main point about clothes. I find she is a good deal of a companion. I see I should be lonesome and depressed without her, now that I have lost my property. Another thing, she says it is ordered that we work for our living hereafter. She will be useful. I will superintend.
They need to find their own pathways, not to be forced into a particular mold as a child. If I think back to my childhood, it's one that's kind of dominated by fear. And it was a fear of disapproval while in the present, but also of eternal damnation.
Do they get taught about hellfire and things like that?
Absolutely. And to a child, images of hellfire and gnashing of teeth are actually very real. They're not metaphorical at all.
Of course not.
No. If you bring a child up and discourage it from thinking freely and making choices freely, then that's still, to me, that is a form of mental abuse or psychological abuse.
Or if you tell a child that when it dies, it's going to roast forever in
hell. That is abusive, yes.
What do they tell you about it? I mean, what happens in hell?
It's strange, isn't it? After all this time, it still has the power to affect me when you ask me that question. Hell is a fearful place. It's complete rejection by God. It's complete judgment. There is real fire. There is real torment, real torture. And it goes on forever.
It was that the builders had decided people might vanish at one point and reappear someplace else, so why bother making a road from one point to the other? The ground was metal. The sky seemed metallic. The buildings loomed on all sides, featureless explorations of plain space by insensitive metal. The man from 1888 felt terribly alone, as though every act he had performed had led inevitably to his alienation from the very people he had sought to aid. When he had come to Toynbee Hall, and the Reverend Mr. Barnett had opened his eyes to the slum horrors of Spitalfields, he had vowed to help in any way he could. It had seemed as simple as faith in the Lord what to do after a few months in the sinkholes of Whitechapel. The sluts, what use were they? No more use than the disease germs that had infected these very same whores. So he had set forth as Jack to perform the will of God and to raise the poor dregs who inhabited the East End of London. That Lord Warren, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, and his queen, and all the rest thought him a mad doctor, or an amok butcher, or a beast in human form, did not distress him. He knew he would remain anonymous through all time, but that the good works he had set in motion would proceed to their wonderful conclusion. The destruction of the most hideous slum area the country had ever known, and the opening of Victorian eyes. But all the time had passed, and now he was here, in a world where slums apparently did not exist, a sterile utopia that was the personification of the Reverend Mr. Barnett's dreams. But it didn't seem right. This grandfather with his young head, silence in the empty streets, the girl, Juliet, and her strange hobby, the lack of concern at her death, the grandfather's expectation that he, Jack, would kill her, and now his friendliness. Where were they going? Around them, the city. As they walked, the grandfather paid no attention, and Jack watched, but did not understand. But this was what they saw as they walked. 1,300 beams of light, 1 foot wide and 7 molecules thick, erupted from almost invisible slits in the metal streets, fanned out and washed the surfaces of the buildings. They altered hue to a vague blue and washed down the surfaces of the buildings. They bent and covered all open surfaces, bent at right angles, then bent again and again like origami paper figures. They altered hue a second time, soft gold, and penetrated the surfaces of the buildings, expanding and contracting in solid waves, washing the inner surfaces. They withdrew rapidly into the sidewalks. The entire process had taken 12 seconds. Night fell over a 16-block area of the city. It descended in a solid pillar and was quite sharp-edged, ending at the street corners. From within the area of darkness came the distinct sounds of crickets, marsh frogs belching, night birds, soft breezes in trees, and faint music of unidentifiable instruments. Panes of frosted light appeared suspended freely in the air overhead. A wavery, insubstantial quality began to assault the topmost levels of a great structure directly in front of the light panes. As the panes moved slowly down through the air, the building became indistinct, turned into motes of light, and floated upward. As the panes reached the pavement, the building had been completely dematerialized. The panes shifted color to a deep orange and began moving upward again. As they moved, a new structure began to form where the previous building had stood, drawing, it seemed, motes of light from the air and forming them into a cohesive whole that became, as the panes ceased their upward movement, a new building. The light panes winked out of existence. The sound of a bumblebee was heard for several seconds, and then it ceased. A crowd of people in rubber garments hurried out of a gray pulsing hole in the air, patted the pavement at their feet, and then rushed off around a corner from where emanated the sound of prolonged coughing, and then silence returned. A drop of water, thick as quicksilver, plummeted to the pavement, struck, bounded, rose several inches, then evaporated into a crimson smear in the shape of a whale's tooth, which settled to the pavement and lay still. 2 blocks of buildings sank into the pavement, and the metal covering was smooth and unbroken, save for a metal tree whose trunk was silver and slim, topped by a ball of foliage constructed of golden fibers that radiated brightly in a perfect circle. There was no sound. The late Juliet's grandfather and the man from 1888 continued walking. Where are we going? To Van Cleef's. We don't usually walk. Oh, sometimes. But it isn't as much pleasure as it used to be. I'm doing this primarily for you. Are you enjoying yourself? It's unusual. Not much like Spitalfields, is it? But I rather like it back there at that time. I have the only Traveler, did you know? The only one ever made. Juliet's father constructed it, my son. I had to kill him to get it. He was thoroughly unreasonable about it, really. It was a casual thing for him. He was the last of the tinkerers, and he might just as easily have given it to me. But I suppose he was being cranky. That was why I had you carve up my granddaughter. She would have gotten around to me almost any time now. Bored. Just silly bored is what she was. The gardenia took shape in the air in front of them and turned into the face of a woman with long, white hair.
Hernan, we can't wait much longer.
She was annoyed. Juliet's grandfather grew livid. You scum bitch! I told you, pace! But no, you just couldn't, could you? Jump! 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 That's all you ever do! Well, now it'll only be fiddles less, that's all. Fiddles, damn you! I said it for pace. I was working pace, and you... His hand came up, and moss grew instantly toward the face. The face vanished, and a moment later the gardenia reappeared a few feet away. The moss shriveled, and Hernan, Juliet's grandfather, dropped his hand as though weary at the woman's stupidity. A rose, a water lily, a hyacinth, a pair of phlox, a wild celandine, and a bull thistle appeared near the gardenia. As each turned into the face of a different person, Jack stepped back, frightened. All the faces turned to the one that had been the bull thistle. Cheat! Rotten bastard! They screamed at the thin white face that had been the bull thistle. The gardenia woman's eyes bulged from her face, the deep purple eyeshadow that completely surrounded the eyeball, making her look like a deranged animal peering out of a cave.
Ted!
She shrieked at the bull thistle man.
We all agreed. We all said and agreed. You had to form the thistle, didn't you, Scott? Well, now you'll see.
She addressed herself instantly to the others.
Forms now. To hell with waiting. Pace Fox. Now.
No, damn it! Hernan shouted. We were going to pay! But it was too late. Centering in on the bull thistle man, the air roiled thickly like silt at a river bottom, and the air blackened as a spiral began with the now terrified face of the bull thistle man and exploded, whirling outward, enveloping Jack and Hernan and all the flower people in the city, and suddenly it was night in Spitalfields. And the man from 1888 was in 1888, with his Gladstone bag in his hand, and a woman approaching down the street toward him, shrouded in the London fog. There were 8 additional nodules in Jack's brain.
Your brain is the devil.
Satan is real, working in spirit. You can see him and hear him in this world every day. Satan is real, working with power. He can tempt you and lead you astray.
I attended service at a little church in the country not long ago. A prayer was led by an old country preacher who then raised his hands as everyone stood and sang, "My God is real." A warm breeze through the open windows brought in the smell of new-mown hay in a nearby field, and the singing of birds could be heard in the moment of silence as the preacher opened his Bible to read. And then a little old man stood up, bent with age, his hair thin and white, and said, "Preacher, tell them that Satan is real too. You can hear him in songs that give praise to idols and sinful things of this world. You can see him in the destruction of homes torn apart. I know that Satan is real, for once I had a happy home. I was loved and respected by my family. I was looked upon as a leader in my community. And then Satan came into my life. I grew selfish and unneighborly. My friends turned against me. And finally, my home was broken apart. My children took their paths into a world of sin. Yes, preacher, it's sweet to know that God is real, and to know that in him all things are possible. And we know that heaven is a real place where joys shall never end. But sinner friend, if you're here today, Satan is real too, and hell is a real place, a place of everlasting punishment.
Satan is real, working in spirit. You can see him and hear him in this world every day. Satan is real, working with power. He can tempt you and lead you astray.
The Blues Brothers and Satan is real. You gotta see the album cover for this. Go look it up on Yahoo. It shows Charlie and Ira standing in front of a 12-foot high plywood lucifer that they set on fire and almost ended up setting themselves on fire. Go take a look.
Alternative is now music to Wall Street's ears. What's popular on Main Street has caught the ear of Wall Street. Several big investment banks have plunked millions of dollars to launch new independent labels that feature alternative music.
At WNWFM until dawn. Good morning. A Friday at 12 to 8. 1968 Linear Groove, WNWFM. Join me in Metro Media Stereo.
Attention everyone, this is an emergency broadcast. The unpleasant noise you are about to hear coming from your radio is not a mistake.
Bureau of Anti-Technology. We've sold so many records, we've sold so many records, we've sold so many records, we've sold so many records.
Playing cake parties. Women and beer.
This book's for you.
Women and beer.
This book's for you.
Women and beer.
This book's for you.
Did I hear him say something about burning Satan in effigy with a 12-foot tall statue? It seems kind of like an oxymoron to me. I mean, isn't fire one of Satan's main bits?
So there is no respite from it.
We all have mics, right? So we can continue the conversation this way.
I don't get a thing on the Navy, man. Keep trying. It's a commercial station.
Please do not turn off your radio, but turn up the volume on your receiver as high as it can go, so that you can make the sound we broadcast as loud as possible.
Radio stations were taken over and destroyed.
Channel 7 salutes our hero. It's brought to you by 102.7 WNAW-FM.
Sheer firepower. Stormtroopers. The American people didn't really know what had happened until it was all over. It was too late.
Earlier today, I ordered American forces to strike Iraq.
America, this is the biggest lie that's ever been put before the American public ever.
Rush Limbaugh. White trash, boar's head.
This whole thing starts at the Gulf War.
Spanking God. Rush Limbaugh.
Oh, what a crock!
You multiculturalist pigs. Howard Stern.
Victim of censorship.
I interrupt. Howard Stern.
Don't kiss my ass. I gotta go to the bathroom. Multi-millionaire. Oh, baby, that's it. I'm really getting off. The king of all media. Central figure. God, Howard. 6'6", thin with long curling brown hair, crucified like Jesus.
That's what it's like to be me. Budding young liberal spigot.
The gays.
I am a admitted homosexual.
Hard enough doing this with a guy. I bet you look like Burt Reynolds. How's your penis?
Well, you certainly shouldn't force yourself to hold it.
It's hanging.
Rush Limbaugh, the guy walking around as a condom.
Not Pumpkinhead. Rush Limbaugh.
Amy Buttafuoco. Joey Fisher. Law and Order. Amy, Joey Fisher.
I am not as big or powerful. I'm
trying to learn so I can serve you better when I'm governor.
Settle them on another reservation.
Just mean you're breaking another promise to them Indians.
This room's here is for us cowboys.
White men talk with two tongues.
You got a big mouth, boy.
This welfare reform.
They expect me to do something.
Put 100,000 new police officers on the streets.
They expect me to do something.
Expand food camps and drug courts.
They expect me to do something.
Export American jobs, not American products. Trust us. Come on out of there.
Trash TV.
The president says the lone duck they killed was the only one they shot at.
Remember this, boys. Every red-blooded man is a potential horror fire.
Why don't you pick out somebody your size, huh?
We don't keep those things in this house. We're vegetarian.
In the beginning, there was just me, God. Then there was the Word.
In the beginning, there was the goddess.
In the beginning there was the law.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the swastika, Lord have mercy.
My repeated response.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
My repeated response. We believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. My repeated response. We believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. My repeated response. We believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church.
Who has saved me and washed me and cleansed me
until the end of time.
Afterwards, we were granted an audience with the Pope. He told us that it was all right to study the evolution of the universe after the Big Bang. But we should not inquire into the Big Bang itself, because that was a moment of creation, and therefore the work of God.
I'd like to alert people to microphones on the floor and invite everybody to be ready to leap in. And to make the conversation go. I'm only one of you listening and trying to make sense of it all. It seems to me all of our storytellers have basically copped a plea here. They're saying it wasn't they who invented this evil as evil, the capital E evil, and I'm frankly wondering whether we should let them off the hook. If the storytellers of the world didn't come up with this kind of embodiment of it all, who in the world did?
5, 1.
It's deeply disturbing to think that there are believers out there who actively use the idea of hell for moral policing. In the United States, Christian obsession with sin has spawned a national craze for hell houses.
And over the edge. Your friendly, stupid weather.
KPFA and KPFB, or KFCF in Fresno. It's Over the Edge. This is your friendly, stupid weatherman.
This is KPFA, KPFB, KFCF in Fresno. And over the edge.
friends. Better. Number is 848445. Area code 510.
Morality plays come Halloween freak shows, in which the evangelical hobby horses of abortion and homosexuality are literally demonized.
Guilty of failing to be creatively concerned.
Come on in. Chrissy, be still. This was your choice. Well, I said any
Good job, guys.
Pastor Keenan Roberts is rehearsing a new production of his Colorado-based Hell House, which he's written and staged for almost 15 years. He fervently believes that you have to scare people into being good.
The call upon my life as a pastor, as a minister, is to tell people what the book says. And what I and we and our church and hundreds of churches across this country and around the world are doing is we have found a very creative, effective tool that is getting people's attention to consider the message.
I believe it.
The sleeves ended midway up her wrists, and the bodice of the dress was buttoned close around her throat.
We needed to fill our minds with something.
She wore a kerchief tied at the neck and a hat that looked like a wide-brimmed skimmer with a raised crown. There was a pathetic little flower of unidentifiable origin in the band of the hat. She carried a beaded handbag of capacious size hanging from a wrist loop. Her steps slowed as she saw him standing there, deep in the shadows. Saw him was hardly accurate. Sensed him. He stepped out and bowed slightly from the waist. "Fair evening to you, miss. Care for a pint?" Her features, sunk in misery of a kind known only to women who have taken in numberless shafts of male blood-gorged flesh, rearranged themselves.
Go, sir. I thought was in for true. Oh, let Aben himself. God almighty, you give me a scare.
She tried to smile. It was a rictus. There were bright spots in her cheeks from sickness and too much gin. Her voice was ragged, a broken-edged instrument barely workable. "Just a solicitor, caught out without company," Jack assured her. "I'm pleased to buy a handsome lady a pint of stout for a few hours' companionship." She stepped toward him and linked arms.
Emily Matthews, sir. I'm pleased to go with you. It's a fearsome chill night, it is, and with slippery Jack abroad, not safe for a respecting woman such as myself.
They moved off down Thrall Street, past the doss houses where this drab might flop later if she could obtain a few coppers from this neat-dressed stranger with the dark eyes. He turned right onto Commercial Street, and just abreast of a stinking alley almost to Flower and Dean Street, he nudged her sharply sidewise. She went into the alley, and thinking he meant to steal a smooth hand up under her petticoats, she settled back against the wall and opened her legs, starting to lift the skirt around her waist. But Jack had hold of the kerchief, and, locking his fingers tightly, he twisted, cutting off her breath. Her cheeks ballooned, and by a vagary of light from a gas standard in the street, he could see her eyes go from hazel to a dead leaf brown in an instant. Her expression was one of terror, naturally, but commingled with it was a deep sadness. At having lost the pint, at having not been able to make her doss for the night, at having had the usual Emily Matthews bad luck to run afoul this night of the one man who would ill-use her favors. It was a consummate sadness at the inevitability of her fate. "I come to you out of the night that sent me down all the minutes of our lives to this instant. From this time forward, men will wonder what happened at this instant. They will silently hunger to go back, to come to my instant with you, and see my face, and know my name, and perhaps not even try to stop me, for then I would not be who I am, but only someone who tried and failed. For you and me, it becomes history that will lure men always, but they will never understand why we both suffered, Emily. They will never truly understand why each of us died so terribly." A film came over her eyes, and as her breath husked out in wheezing, pleading tremors, his free hand went into the pocket of the greatcoat. He had known he would need it when they were walking, and he had already invaded the Gladstone bag. Now his hand went into the pocket and came up with the scalpel. "Emily," softly. And then he sliced her. Neatly, angling the point of the scalpel into the soft flesh behind and under her left ear. Sternocleidomastoidus. Driving it into the gentle crunch of cartilage giving way, then grasping the instrument tightly, tipping it down and drawing it across the width of the throat following the line of the firm jaw. Glandula submandibularis. The blood poured out over his hands, ran thickly at first, and then burst spattering past him, reaching the far wall of the alley, up his sleeves, soaking his white cuffs. She made a watery rattle and sank limply in his grasp, his fingers still twisted tight in her kerchief, black abrasions where he had scored the flesh. He continued the cut up past the point of the jaw's end and sliced into the lobe of the ear. He lowered her to the filthy paving. She lay crumpled and he straightened her. Then he cut away the garments, laying her naked belly open to the wan and flickering light of the gas standard in the street. Her belly was bloated. He started the primary cut in the hollow of her throat. Glandula thyroidea. His hand was sure as he drew a thin black line of blood down and down between the breasts. Sternum. Cutting a deep cross in the hole of her navel. Something vaguely yellow oozed up. Plica umbilicalis media. Down over the rounded hump of the belly, biting more deeply, withdrawing for a neat incision. Mesenterium dorsal commune. Down to the matted with sweat roundness of her privates. Harder here. Vesica urinaria. And finally to the end. Vagina. Filth hole. Foul-smelling, dye-red lust pit, wet hole of sluts. And in his head, succubi. And in his head, eyes watching. And in his head, minds impinging. And in his head, titillation. For a gardenia, a water lily, a rose, a hyacinth, a pair of phlox, a wild celandine, and a dark flower with petals of obsidian, a stamen of onyx, pistils of anthracite, and the mind of Hernon, who was the late Juliet's grandfather. They watched the entire horror of the mad anatomy lesson. They watched him nick the eyelids. They watched him remove the heart. They watched him slice out the fallopian tubes. They watched him squeeze till it ruptured, the ginny kidney. They watched him slice off the sections of breast till they were nothing but shapeless mounds of bloody meat, and arrange them, one mound each, on a still staring, wide-open, nicked eyelid eye. They watched. They watched, and they drank from the deep, troubled pool of his mind. They sucked deeply at the moist, quivering core of his id. And they delighted.
Oh, God, how delicious. Look at it. Look at that. It looks like the uneaten rind of a pizza. Oh, look at that. It looks like lumaconi. Oh, God. Oh, I wonder what it would be like to taste it.
See how smooth the steel. He hates them all, every one of them. Something about a girl, a venereal disease, fear of his God, Christ, the Reverend Mr. Barnett. He wants to fuck the Reverend's wife. Social reform can only be brought about by concerted effort of a devoted few. Social reform is a justifiable end, condoning any expedient short of decimation of over 50% of the people who will be served by the reforms. The best social reformers are the most audacious. He believes it! How lovely! You pack of vampires! You filth! You scum! You...
He senses us.
Damn him! Damn you, Hernan! You drew off too deeply! He knows we're here! That's disgusting! What's the sense now? I'm withdrawing!
Come back! You'll end the farm!
Back they plunged in the spiral as it spiraled back in upon itself, and the darkness of the night of 1888 withdrew. The spiral drew in and locked at its most infinitesimal point as the charred and blackened face of the man who had been the bull thistle. He was quite dead. His eye holes had been burned out. Charred wreckage lay where intelligence had lived. They had used him as a focus. The man from 1888 came back to himself instantly with a full and eidetic memory of what he had just experienced. It had not been a vision, nor a dream, nor a delusion, nor a product of his mind. It had happened. They had sent him back, erased his mind of the transfer into the future, of Juliet, of everything after the moment outside number 13 Miller's Court, and they had set him to work pleasuring them while they drained off his feelings, his emotions, and his unconscious thoughts, while they battened and gorged themselves with the most private sensations, most of which, till this moment, in a strange feedback, he had not even known he possessed. As his mind plunged on from one revelation to the next, he felt himself growing ill. At one concept, his mind tried to pull back and plunge him into darkness rather than confront it. But the barriers were down. They had opened new patterns, and he could read it all, remember it all.
Stinking sex hole. Sluts. They have to die.
No, that wasn't the way he thought of women. Any women, no matter how low or common. He was a gentleman, and women were to be respected.
She had given him the clap. He remembered.
The shame and the endless fear till he had gone to his physician father and confessed it. The look on the man's face. He remembered it all. The way his father had tended him. The way he would have tended a plague victim. It had never been the same between them again. He had tried for the cloth.
Social reform?
You want to hear something really heavy? You want to hear something that's going to kick your balls off? Everybody likes different songs. How about the one that was on the B-side of the Nightmare single? What?
Your brain is the devil.
Even when we didn't have anything to be concerned about.
Who are we going to blame for this sense of a capital E, evil? But let me sort of go the low road to politics right away. President Bush, George W. Bush, has continued the Ronald Reagan tradition of speaking of our foreign enemies as evil, the empire of evil, and now a war against evil. Several questions here, but the first one is simply, where does this come from? And is it an American, is it a peculiarly, of course Osama bin Laden is playing the same game now, but is it an American failing that we do this thing? I also want to say, and I don't mean to load it up too much against President Bush, but sort of no candidate that I can remember, including Jimmy Carter, sort of wore Jesus Christ on his sleeve quite as aggressively as George W. Bush did when
we want to leave an indelible impression upon their life that sin destroys. Every scene preaches the truth that either sin destroys or Jesus saves.
You weren't gonna hurt me! You're hurting me! Chrissy, it's only a medical procedure. No! No, I changed my mind!
It's just too bad! I wasn't there the night you were born!
Good. If this is a rehearsal, think how horrific the full production must be.
It did seem the natural thing to do.
I presume you have a cut-off age for the tour. I mean, no children below an age of... What is your cut-off age?
Well,
you know, this show can really make you rethink your life choices. You must learn to be careful of this.
Could we admit to our failings? Of course not. If we didn't have such a busy mind, we would be forced to see our guilts.
Over the years of having audiences and people go through this, we have come to the decision that the best age for young people is really at 12.
You see, killing babies is such a wonderful choice. It's so convenient.
Would it worry you if a child of 12 coming to see your performance had nightmares afterwards? Or would you like that?
I would like for their life to be changed, no matter what. I would rather for them to understand that hell is a place that they absolutely do not want to go. I would rather reach them with that message at 12 than to not reach them with that message and have them live a life of sin and to never find the Lord Jesus Christ.
Do you solemnly swear to never believe that you are normal and that God is responsible for making you this way?
In the case of homosexual marriage, what harm does that do? Why would you be so passionately against that?
They're living in sin.
That's your opinion, but it's nothing to do with you, is it? It's
not
their
my
decision.
Opinion. It's not my opinion. I'm telling you what the Bible says.
Bible's opinion, but these are two people who want to live together. Isn't it their own business? What right have you to interfere?
This woman, burning in a repulsive lust for one another, deceived by all around that they've been born gay, are joining their deeply confused lives in this nauseating matrimony.
1 Corinthians 6, God says.
1 Corinthians 6, God says, homosexuality equals sin. And sin...
I want them to know homosexuality is sin.
But you...
and our commitment to reality. So we worried about the war, about the kids. Worry made us industrious busybodies who meddled in every kind of affair for the greater pride value. But then we got involved and created bigger problems we couldn't solve with worry. Again, worry is the action of the mind in the dark, forgetting the truth.
If that individual hits the snooze alarm button, they will drop in frequency to an unaroused state, or even into theta, or sometimes fall back to sleep in delta. During this awakening cycle, it is possible for individuals to stay in the theta state for an extended period of, say, 5 to 15 minutes, which would allow them to have a free flow of ideas about yesterday's events or to contemplate the activities of the forthcoming day. This time can be an extremely productive and can be a period of very meaningful and creative mental activity.
I'm sitting here and thinking that evil is basically a word, and people sort of bat it around like a ping pong ball. You know, it's your turn, it's my turn. To me, if there's any evil, and I'm not sure that evil is the right word, it was the great act of the 20th century is the Holocaust. And that, around that, next to that, everything else is pretty turbulent.
Accelerated Christian education.
Have you been to one of these schools? No. Okay.
Accelerated Christian education slips religious superstitions back into science.
If you want to be rude, you would say it's program learning. If you want to be polite, it's individualized instruction. So really, each one is teaching themselves. To a certain extent, of course, that has to be modified with adult supervision and so on.
Right, so here you need to find the page where the answer is and write the page number next to it. When you find the answer, you need to underline this. Okay?
I had a look at the curriculum booklet that we use for science, and it was very noticeable that God or Jesus did come on just about every page.
Yes, yeah. We don't have anything like religious instruction in the school because it is part of...
You wouldn't need it.
No, of course not. Absolutely.
In one section in the science thing, I was sort of taken aback because I suddenly started reading about Noah's Ark.
A man walks into the psychiatrist's office and says, "Doctor, life seems harsh. I can't cope anymore. I just want to end it all." And the doctor says, "I can help you, my friend. Just tune in on Thursday nights at midnight to the Over the Edge show hosted by Izzy Isn't." And the man replies, "But doctor, you don't understand. I am Izzy Isn't."
Immortal words, when first they were written, proclaimed to the world an idea new among men. This was the American dream, the prayer for the future. We pay tribute here not to a man who lived a century ago, but to an individual who lives today in the hearts of all freedom-loving people. His prophetic words are as valid for our time as they were for his. And now, the skills of the sculptor and the talents of the artist will let us relive great moments with Mr. Lincoln.
The world has never had a good definition of the words God, bull. And the American people just now are much in want of one. We all declare for God, bull everywhere. We all declare this faith in God, bull as the heritage of all men. But in using the same word, God, we do not all mean the same thing. What constitutes God bull? It is the bull which the pulpit has planted in our bosoms. Destroy this spirit. Destroy this faith bull. The God bull planted in our bosoms. And you have planted the seeds of liberty around your own doors. By what means shall we fortify against God bull? Shall we expect?
You infect my world with your presence.
Shall we expect some transatlantic military giant to step the ocean and crush God bull? Never. 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 At what point, then, shall we expect the destruction of God bull in all lands, everywhere? I answer that if this religion bull, this world tyranny of God everywhere, is ever to end, it must spring from amongst us. We ourselves, the authors, must be the finishers. God must die by suicide. Let God's suicide be breathed by every American mother to the lisping babe that prattles God bull on her lap. Let the dangers of God bull be preached from the pulpit, proclaimed in legislative halls, and enforced in courts of justice. And in short, let God's suicide become the political religion of the nation. And let the gods of all sexes and tongues and colors, gods of Europe, Asia, and Africa combined, let all the gods in all lands be sacrificed unceasingly at God's suicide altars everywhere. And let us deserve, as far as mortals may, the continued destruction of God bull, trusting that in future national emergencies, God bull will fail to provide us the instruments of safety and security. Let us to the end dare to do our duty, to crush this God bull tyranny of 1,000 years as we understand it.
When the automatic front panel opens, please step out to your right.
In the midst of all the fun and frivolity, I have a serious question. Is Mr. Shaw in the house tonight? Just curious. I'll take my answer on the air. Thank you.
Nobody's in the house but me. Izzy isn't. This is Over the Edge. This is Your Brain is the Devil, Part 7. This is KPFA, KPFB in Berkeley, KFCF in Fresno. Non-commercial radio. Have you noticed? No commercials. Isn't that nice? Well, to keep it that way, you can support us by going to Negativland. Going to kpfa.org and contributing to this station to keep it free and easy.
Proudly trying to fix what it did in the dark.
Your brain is the devil.
Hey, all you folks out there listening to this show, I know you're there. You know, there's a phone number you can call. It's area code 510-848-4425 is the number, and you can participate. I mean, must I do all the talking? God.
We couldn't stop worrying before because we didn't want to stop. It had an ego value for us. It always seemed like love for others. It made us forget our empty, faulty, meaningless existence. It won badges of honor for this or that cause. Had we a grain of true concern, we would never had anything to worry about.
I was living in a devil town. Didn't know it was a devil town. Oh Lord, it really brings me down about the devil town. And all my friends were vampires. Didn't know they were vampires. Turns out I was a vampire myself in the devil town. I was living in a devil town. Didn't know it was a devil town. Oh Lord, it really brings me down about the devil town.
Now, I'm not sure that evil even applies to that, in terms of the big E. It seems to me that there are specific human beings who implemented it, and historically there are reasons that they were rationalized, but that it's a very human kind of phenomenon. And then when we reach for abstractions, that we're sort of just reaching for stereotypes.
No great activity of the mind to testify to our ego's greatness. Oh, how the vain ego loves to play God.
And gloat over all the faults of creation. How little do we realize that we ourselves unconsciously project those problems so that we might be continuously excited over those imperfections of creation.
In summary, there are 4 brainwave states that range from the high amplitude, low frequency delta to the low amplitude, high frequency beta. These brainwave states range from deep dreamless sleep to high arousal. The same 4 brainwave states are common to the human species. Men, women and children of all ages experience the same characteristic brainwaves.
I want them to know homosexuality is sin.
But you believe it presumably on the basis of scriptural authority.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Unapologetic.
Yes, unapologetically. But why are you so sure that's right? I mean, if you think about where the scriptures come from, I mean, Who wrote them and when? And what makes you so confident they're right?
All delusion. He had been a mountebank, a clown, and worse.
When the phone stops ringing, do not say hello. Use your phone as a microphone, and it's your input into the universe.
And be challenged again and again to change them.
My advice should not be converted into food, nor used as a weapon against your children. Not that you're ever going to have any children.
He had slaughtered for something in which not even he believed. They left his mind wide open, and his thoughts stumbled, raced further and further toward the thought of explosion in his mind. He fell face forward on the smooth and polished metal pavement, but he never touched. Something arrested his fall, and he hung suspended, bent over at the waist like a ridiculous punch divested of strings or manipulation from above. A whiff of something invisible, and he was in full possession of his senses almost before they had left him. His mind was forced to look at it.
He wants to fuck the Reverend Mr. Barnett's wife. He wants to fuck the Reverend Mr. Barnett's wife. He wants to fuck the Reverend Mr. Barnett's wife! He wants to fuck the Reverend Mr. Barnett's wife!
That is not gratuitous. That is not gratuitous obscenity. That is necessary to the drama of the story. I realize those words are not to be played on the radio. However, I didn't know they were there. Well, I knew they were there, but I didn't remember they were there. Now I remember. I will never play this again, but if you try to prosecute me for inflammatory obscenity on the air, I will fight it all the way to the Supreme Court in defense of drama. Thank you from Over the Edge.
Henrietta, with her pious petition to Queen Victoria.
Madam, we, the women of East London, feel horror at the dreadful sins that have been lately committed in our midst.
I had to turn the speaker down because my window is open into the night. So afraid of what people walking their dogs might think. And no, it's okay this time of the morning. There's been recent rulings to that effect. You may rest assured that it is thus.
I rest, but not assured.
Asking for the capture of himself, of Jack, whom she would never, not ever suspect was residing right there with her and the Reverend in Toynbee Hall. The thought was laid as naked as her body in the secret dreams he had never remembered upon awakening. All of it. They had left him with open doors, with unbounded horizons, and he saw himself for what he was. A psychopath, a butcher, a lecher, a hypocrite, a clown.
You did this to me. Why did you do this?
Frenzy cloaked his words. The flower faces became the solidified hedonists who had taken him back to 1888 on that senseless voyage of slaughter. Van Cleef, the gardenia woman, sneered,
Why do you think, you ridiculous bumpkin? Bumpkin, is that the right colloquialism, Hernan? I'm so uncertain in the mid-dialects. When you're done in Juliet, Hernan wanted to send you back. But why should he? He owed us at least 3 forms, and you did passing well for one of them.
Jack shouted at him until the cord stood out in his throat.
Was it necessary, this last one? Was it important to do it? To help my reforms?
Don't play cards with Satan. He'll deal you an awful hand. Don't play cards with Satan. He'll deal you an awful hand. Did I ever stop and tell you I am a desperate man? I thought I saw a bluebird sitting on a post. Thought I saw a bluebird sitting on a post. Shiver down my spine, I thought it was the Holy Ghost. I heard the word before, and I knew that it was good. I heard the word before, and I knew that it was good. Somebody ought to do like the good book should. I heard the voice of Satan crying in the woods. Heard the voice of Satan crying in the world. Saw my own heart laying black with blood. Don't play cards with Satan. He'll deal you an awful hand. Don't play cards with Satan. He'll deal you an awful hand. Did I ever stop and tell you I am a desperate man? A desperate man. Take it.
This program will be interrupted for any important news flash. And now, Larry Elliott.
This is the first Texaco Star Theater broadcast ever to go on the air without its distinguishing air signature, the sound of the siren and bell.
for what is better, that in reality is much worse, that again challenged the spirit of vainglory to new lows of triumph.
It's what I believe.
I know you'd
It
like
is,
to,
it is a
but why?
faith. It is a faith issue.
How desperate we've been for others to cry out in need for us.
With me, why do you not believe it?
How we needed their needs.
Because of evidence.
And in helping made them need us again.
Hell House is the brash end of a much bigger problem with the way religious belief works. Taken to its extremes, as by American evangelists, the Bible is scanned for passages to justify right-wing views on abortion and family values. I'm about to meet a believer who uses the Word of God to fight against centuries of human progress.
I think execution for adultery is not rejected.
Not rejected by whom? By you?
No, by the New Testament.
What
writers.
about you? Do you favor execution of adultery?
I think that's fair to say that that's still a proper punishment that the state ought to prosecute.
We were glad that no one was perfect, so that we were glorified in worrying, coming to their aid like an angel from heaven. We once enjoyed taking accounts of all of our grudges and reveling in the memories of past glories. This was the substance of our ugly pride. It would sit and worry and reminisce about conquests and peer into its storehouse of intellectual achievements. The mind abounded in the knowledge that testified to our glory.
Hey, somebody call in and help out this dude. He is trying very hard to entertain you. He is working very, very hard. The wisdom of this show is immeasurable, I must say. That's because there's nothing to measure.
People talk about money, and it's alien to me. I'm not interested in money.
How about life? Mr. Kennedy, how about life? Previously, just hold on, wait. Go ahead.
Thank you. Previously to the 21st of May, people have asked you about a spiritual earthquake. And at that time, you were very explicit. You said it will not.
We don't know everything. The Bible is very complex. I challenge any one of you.
Long time caller and long time listener. And I am the man with a big brain. I have such a big brain that I look like a stonehead big brain. Now my spacecraft is going to pick me up in a bit. I just want to let you know where I'm going to be. I'm going to be signing a book and autograph at the KPFA studios tomorrow night. And you can take pictures with me with my big cone head. Okay, thank you. Bye.
You start reading the book of Jeremiah, verse by verse.
You're mean.
Or any other book of the Bible, but take a book like Jeremiah, and you start reading it and read every word, and then try to decide what is God saying. What is God saying? I don't know if any of you have ever tried that, but that's a very good lesson for you to test just what the Bible is, and you'll find that you'll read verse after verse, and you'll wonder, what is God talking about?
That outshouted our growing conscience to the contrary. To all this noise was added a din of distraction that made us forget only how wrong we were. And it made us forget the truth, that we labored not for ourselves, which we were wont to believe, but labored instead for the spirit of vainglory.
Obviously, Bush is following his speechwriter, and he's saying things that are, I would guess, cued to the American public. Every president does that, including Clinton. I mean, especially including Clinton. But I think all of us who were speaking were sort of indicating, I heard Kathleen say, the evils that you encounter in Dakota, in this these so-called ordinary people, that I'm so much more comfortable with the idea of evil.
It's interesting, I hear you play clips of Roy Masters. And that guy, he's sort of an evil guy. I mean, he not only is the most virulent anti-gay voice I've ever heard on the air, but he's against music. He does not think that music should be listened to. I guess he considers it a spiritual distraction.
When I called a while ago to say that this show has no wisdom, I did not mean to say that in that context. I meant to say that this show goes beyond wisdom.
Well, that goes without saying. You know, that guy's still around, still jabbering his craziness. And every
It's
show
not so
I
bad,
see
surely,
available
to-
online. It's a good source of clips, of samples, as you well know.
Believe in moral codes handed down to us from the good book. Doesn't the Bible give us a moral framework in which to live?
I wish people wouldn't be such meanies, religious people, all around the world. There's so many bad examples. Don't be meanies.
Well, no. The holy texts are of dubious origin and veracity, and they're internally contradictory. And when we look closely, we find a system of morals which any civilized person today should surely find poisonous.
We labored for effect. With a few pretty words we tickled other deluded souls to tickle our vanity back again with approval.
The Old Testament is in every church and synagogue throughout the world and is the root of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
If your brother, the son of your father or of your mother, or your son or daughter, or the spouse whom you embrace, tries to secretly seduce you, saying, "Let us go and serve other gods,"
This is God's advice on what to do to a friend or family member who suggests you believe in another deity.
There's a lot of religious nuts, and they're getting on TV. Well, they hate the devil's guts, but can't they see? If they hate the devil's guts, well, they don't love thy enemy. We gotta love thy enemy. Gotta love thy enemy. Enough. Well, up ya, up ya.
I'd like to thank Suicide Man for that mention of me. After all these years, I can introduce myself. You can call me the Fly-By-Night with a K, because I like to swoop in, do my thing, and swoop out. I don't like to stay on the air and talk to the folks because I know they're too busy entertaining us. Once again, thanks. Expect me when you hear my voice.
We infected the world with problems in the guise of love, so that we would have something to gripe about, and gloat over, and worry about, all of which made us seem like superior beings.
Was it?
Hernan laughed.
Of course not.
Jack sank to his knees. The city let him do it.
Oh, God Almighty. I've done what I've done. I'm covered with blood. And for nothing. For nothing!
Cassio, who had been one of the flocks, seemed puzzled.
Why is he concerned about this one if the others don't bother him?
No.
I think that maybe my girlfriend is the devil. Ever since she started staying up, listening to Over the Edge with me, she's been messing with my mojo. So although I'm listening, I'm not calling in. I don't know. I think it's kind of private.
Rillag, who had been a wild Celandine, said sharply, "They do. All of them do. Probe him, you'll see." Cassio's eyes rolled up in his head an instant, and then rolled down and refocused. Jack felt a quicksilver shudder in his mind, and it was gone. And he said lackadaisically, With the latch of the Gladstone, he opened the bag and pulled out the fetus in the bottle, Mary Jane Kelly's unborn child from November 9th, 1888. He held it in front of his face a moment, and then dashed it to the metal pavement. It never struck. It vanished a fraction of an inch from the clean, sterile surface of the city street.
What marvelous loathing,
exulted Rose, who had been a rose.
Hernan,
said Van Cleef.
He's centering on you. He begins to blame you for all of this.
Hernan was laughing, without moving his lips, as Jack pulled Juliet's electrical scalpel from the Gladstone and lunged. Jack's words were incoherent, but what he was saying as he struck was, "I'll show you what filth you are! I'll show you! You can't do this kind of thing! I'll teach you! You'll die, all of you!" This is what he was saying, but it came out as one long, sustained bray of revenge, frustration, hatred, and directed frenzy. Hernan was still laughing as Jack drove the whisper-thin blade with its shimmering current into his chest. Almost without manipulation on Jack's part, the blade circumscribed a perfect 360-degree hole that charred and shriveled, exposing Hernan's pulsing heart and wet organs. He had time to shriek with confusion before he received Jack's second thrust, a direct lunge that severed the heart from its attachments. Vena cava superior, aorta, arteria pulmonalis, bronchus principalis. The heart flopped forward, and a spreading wedge of blood under tremendous pressure ejaculated, spraying Jack with such force that it knocked his hat from his head and blinded him. His face was now a dripping black-red collage of features and blood. Hernan followed his heart and fell forward into Jack's arms. Then the flower people screamed as one, vanished, and Hernan's body slipped from Jack's hands to wink out of existence an instant before it struck at Jack's feet. The walls around him were clean, unspotted, sterile, metallic, uncaring. He stood in the street holding the bloody knife. "Now!" he screamed, holding the knife aloft. "Now it begins!" If the city heard, it made no indication, but pressure accelerated in temporal linkages. A section of shining wall on a building 80 miles away changed from silver to rust. In the freezer chambers, 200 gelatin caps were fed into a ready trough. The weathermaker spoke softly to itself, accepted data, and instantly constructed an intangible mnemonic circuit. And in the shining eternal city where night only fell when the inhabitants had need of night, and called specifically for night, night fell, with no warning save, "Now!" In the city of sterile loveliness, a creature of filth and decaying flesh prowled. In the last city of the world, a city on the edge of the world, where the ones who had devised their own paradise lived, the prowler made his home in shadows. Slipping from darkness to darkness with eyes that saw only movement, he roamed in search of a partner to dance his deadly rigadoon. He found the first woman as she materialized beside a small waterfall that flowed out of empty air and dropped its shimmering, tinkling moisture into an azure cube of nameless material. He found her and drove the living blade into the back of her neck. Then he sliced out the eyeballs and put them into her open hands. He found the second woman in one of the towers, making love to a very old man who gasped and wheezed and clutched his heart as the young woman forced him to passion. She was killing him as Jack killed her. He drove the living blade into the lower rounded surface of her belly, piercing her sex organs as she rode astride the old man. She decamped blood and viscous fluids over the prostrate body of the old man, who also died, for Jack's blade had severed the penis within the young woman. She fell forward across the old man, and Jack left them that way, joined in the final embrace. He found a man and throttled him with his bare hands, even as the man tried to dematerialize. Then Jack recognized him as one of the flocks and made neat incisions in the face, into which he inserted the man's genitals. He found another woman as she was singing a gentle song about eggs to a group of children. He opened her throat and severed the strings hanging inside. He let the vocal cords drop onto her chest, but he did not touch the children, who watched it all avidly. He liked children. He prowled through the unending night, making a grotesque collection of hearts, which he cut out of 1, 3, 9 people. And when he had a dozen, he took them and laid them as road markers on one of the wide boulevards that never were used by vehicles, for the people of this city had no need of vehicles. Oddly, the city did not clean up the hearts, nor were the people vanishing any longer. He was able to move with relative impunity, hiding only when he saw large groups that might be searching for him. But something was happening in the city. Once, he heard the peculiar sound of metal grating on metal, the plastic cutting into plastic, though he could not have identified it as plastic, and he instinctively knew it was the sound of a machine malfunctioning. He found a woman bathing and tied her up with strips of his own garments and cut off her legs at the knees and left her still sitting up in the swirling crimson bath, screaming as she bled away her life. The legs he took with him. And when he found a man hurrying to get out of the night, he pounced on him, cut his throat, and sawed off the arms. He replaced the arms with the bathwoman's legs. And it went on and on for a time that had no measure. He was showing them what evil could produce. He was showing them their immorality was silly beside his own. But one thing finally told him he was winning. As he lurked in an antiseptically pure space between two low aluminum cubes, he heard a voice that came from above him and around him and even from inside him. It was a public announcement, broadcast by whatever mental communication system the people of the city on the edge of the world used.
Our city is part of us. We are part of our city. It responds to our minds and we control it. The gestalt that we have become is threatened. We have an alien force within the city and we are gearing to locate it. But the mind of this man is strong. It is breaking down the functions of the city. This endless night is an example. We must all concentrate. We must all consciously focus our thoughts to maintaining the city. This threat is of the first order. If our city dies, we die.
It was not an announcement in those terms, though that was how Jack interpreted it. The message was much longer and much more complex, but that was what it meant, and he knew he was winning. He was destroying them. Social reform was laughable, they had said. He would show them. And so he continued with his lunatic pogrom. He butchered and slaughtered and carved them wherever he found them, and they could not vanish, and they could not escape, and they could not stop him. The collection of hearts grew to 50 and 70 and then 100. He grew bored with hearts and began cutting out their brains. That collection grew. For numberless days it went on, and from time to time in the clean, scented autoclave of the city, he could hear the sounds of screaming. His hands were always sticky. Then he found Van Cleef and leaped from hiding in the darkness to bring her down. He raised the living blade to drive it into her breast, but she vanished. He got to his feet and looked around. Van Cleef reappeared 10 feet from him. He lunged for her, and again she was gone, to reappear 10 feet away. Finally, when he had struck at her half a dozen times and she had escaped him each time, he stood panting, arms at sides, looking at her. And she looked back at him with disinterest.
You no longer amuse us,
she said, moving her lips. Amuse? His mind whirled down into a place far darker than any he had known before, and through the murk of his bloodlust he began to realize. It had all been for their amusement. They had let him do it. They had given him the run of the city, and he had capered and gibbered for them. Evil? He had never even suspected the horizons of that word. He went for her, but she disappeared with finality. He was left standing there as the daylight returned, as the city cleaned up the mess, took the butchered bodies, and did with them what it had to do. In the freezer chambers, the gelatin caps were returned to their niches. No more inhabitants of the city need be thawed to provide Jack the Ripper with utensils for his amusement of the Sybarites. His work was truly finished. He stood there in the empty street, a street that would always be empty to him. The people of the city had all along been able to escape him, and now they would. He was finally and completely the clown they had shown him to be. He was not evil. He was pathetic. He tried to use the living blade on himself, but it dissolved into motes of light and wafted away on a breeze that had blown up for just that purpose. Alone, he stood there staring at the victorious cleanliness of this utopia. With their talents, they would keep him alive, possibly alive forever, immortal in the possible expectation of needing him for amusement again, someday. He was stripped to raw essentials in a mind that was no longer anything more than jelly matter, to go madder and madder, and never to know peace or end or sleep. He stood there, a creature of dirt and alleys, in a world as pure as the first breath of a baby. "My name isn't Jack," he said softly, but they would never know his real name, nor would they care. "My name isn't Jack," he said loudly. No one heard. "My name isn't Jack, and I've been bad, very bad. I'm an evil person, but my name isn't Jack!" He screamed and screamed and screamed again, walking aimlessly down an empty street, in plain view, no longer forced to prowl. A stranger in the city.
Your hand must strike the first blow in putting him to death. You must stone him to death, since he has tried to divert you from Yahweh, your God.
The God of the Old Testament has got to be the most unpleasant character in all fiction.
Which means dissension, disharmony. Somebody's got a lot of adrenaline or testosterone.
What's it gonna be? The guy can't just sit here and do nothing while his country's at war. Can't do the job I can do for America.
You bet so. I'll give you a job. And I've got a job for every single boy and girl who's out.
I just want to say that this is a really good mix tonight, my friend. And as always, you remain your own best friend. I will bid you a good night.
In exchange for a sense of worth, power and glory, we traded our bodies.
And
We
yet
served the wrong purpose.
This is the way we have to search out the Bible. It's very slow.
Hoping upon hope that the purpose we served would be our very own.
And very tedious. And yet we have to do it.
What
And
can you
we
do to help bring our country victory? Well, listen.
You mean to tell me you aren't seeing?
I am the Lord thy God.
so much noise and try to frighten me.
You know, and basically it's an instinct for combat in human beings.
With worry we hope to serve our ego a notion of its concern for others.
Speaking of, last question for me. Nathan, what is the difference in terms of thinking about evil in going from a very, very religious perspective on life to a very, very not religious perspective on life?
Is that God bless a religious education. I have, it's almost like a secret, it's like being a Mason or something. We have a secret handshake of anyone who had a religious education, whatever the religion, if you've left it, because it's hardwired. The synapses just fire a certain way. So, personally, I will always think of evil the same way, that, in terms of my personal punishment. But I've deconstructed it. In terms of the rest of the world, I've really deconstructed it. It's exactly as I've already said, which I just think it's, it's rhetoric. You're not going to have a pure form of, or a universal form of evil.
In place of our failure to love them, and to mask the fact that we've used them to worry.
For a long time now, I've been telling you how to train and work and practice to be a good athlete. That's one thing most boys and girls want to be. They want strong bodies and keen minds and the skill it takes to win. They want to be champions.
And they sat down to dinner, and the farmer's wife could tell he thought the bountiful feast was a bit bland. He thought, how do they taste it? She said, the Lord seasons our food. And he said, could you pass the salt? She said, we haven't got any. There is no salt! But just then, the farmer's daughter twinked his leg, placed a bottle of Tabasco.
Yeah, but how can I help America by training to be a champion?
These days, America needs champions, and I'm telling you, one of the greatest and most valuable services a boy or girl can do for our country is to be in tip-top physical condition.
She is the devil without reverb.
I fell over the edge.
Then, when the time comes, you'll be ready to step in and do your part toward bringing victory.
Say, that's right. An athlete is the kind of guy our country needs. Look at Bob Feller.
Yes, and look at all the trained athletes who...
Making you do those things you didn't want to do, but felt you had to do it at the time. Have
God loves you no matter what you think.
You lie.
Quit playing around on the phone. 3 o'clock in the morning. Quit playing around.
Jealous and proud of it. Petty, vindictive, unjust, unforgiving, racist. An ethnic cleanser urging his people on.
That everyone agrees is evil.
I have a question for Nathan. Now, I really don't know the answer, but isn't it the case that Judaism did not have a tradition of demonizing its enemy quite so much as Christianity?
Just because there's too many, we have to spread the energy out. But that's why I think.
In the very beginning.
Yeah, and religious mix, I think that's it. Where I really did have a fire and brimstone education, but I think the text-wise, no, that's why I was happy to hear you're small. I remember learning the Gemara, the Talmud, and seeing Satan coming in exactly as a side character. Like this is.
But also Jews were not eager.
Well, we had Sheol. We didn't even have heaven and hell. There was the limbo.
Right.
That was when King Saul goes to talk to Solomon, or vice versa.
But that's so important with Christians. You're damned or you're saved. But also.
I've never heard so much pussyfooting around in my life. This reminds me of the discussion in the early 50s of sex. Everybody's saying, oh, evil, we don't have it in our house, we don't have it in our place, it's just unbelievable.
To acts of genocide.
What helpless, pitiful things we created. What rebellious Frankensteins we sired to fight against our need to feel saintly. Who used our hypocrisies to champion their ego glory. In the guise of making them better, we made them imperfect, so we would have a full-time preoccupation of worry to forget our miserable selves.
Demonize Christians?
Well, you didn't pray and therefore demons got you. Well, demons have more power than we have.
Where are they good?
Who are these dangerous people? These members of the religious right? Well, they could be your neighbors, fellow church members, maybe even you.
I make crosses so he'll hate me.
Crucify every one of his messiahs.
Silence in the court! We hereby announce
Now, the witchcraft is proved. It's evident that the girl and the goat work together.
Are you a member of the communist conspiracy as of this moment?
I am not. I am not. I am not.
and never have been a member of the Communist Party.
I repeat, they can see how low an alleged man can sink.
And happy birthday to Zachary, who turned like 95. Happy birthday, Zachary.
You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. No one knows how low. No one knows how low. No one knows how low. No one knows how low.
Yours is a magic I have never encountered.
Actually, it's not magic. Actually, it's not magic. It's man's ability to take science.
The earth isn't round, it's flat. The earth isn't round, it's flat. How do you know? I've observed it all. I've traveled over Europe. It's flat. Everywhere it's flat.
Witches, sorcerers, and gypsies.
You blaspheme before this God of God.
Just the name? Just the name?
Are you refusing to answer?
Deny. Did you ever heard voices?
Other voices spoke to me too.
Where is your Saint Michael now?
Other voices spoke to me too.
There's a committee in here to help keep America just as pure as possibly can be.
I assume the Lord has spoken to you again?
Oh, he has, sir. I heard the voice of God commanding me to go to Hawaii.
Almighty God, we thank thee that thou hast chosen one of us to carry thy holy word to the wicked and benighted heathen of Hawaii.
It is from God, and not from any Ali Louis, that you receive your spiritual consecration.
The Bible can be a terrifying book. This is the temple of God, a gentle God, a God of love and mercy.
Now this is my final offer. $24 and not a penny more.
Robbery! White man robbed poor Indians.
The outrageous stealing of land from the Indians.
Blasphemers, heathens, heretics!
I don't believe in your God of wrath, and I will no longer call myself a Christian.
The cross and the white robe have had a long, introverted relationship.
God Almighty does not hear the prayer of a Jew. Look away, look away, look away, take the land.
That will just about do it for Over the Edge tonight. Your Brain is the Devil, Part 7 it's been. Join me again in 2 weeks. That's 2 weeks. Second Thursday in October. Barbara Golden and Crack of Dawn will be here the first Thursday in October, as she is every first Thursday of every month. I'm Izzy Isn't, bidding you a healthy and wise tomorrow. And stay tuned right here for the Puzzling Evidence Show. This is KPFA, KPFB in Berkeley, KFCF in Fresno, kpfa.org online.
To create is divine. To reproduce is human. Man Ray.
Bye-bye.